I'm Dr. Edward Church, Executive Director of the Institute for Environmental Entrepreneurship, which is based in Berkeley, California. I'm here at the San Francisco offices of Arup, which is a global planning, engineering, and design firm that commissioned us to help them understand more about the human interaction with the built environment so that we could all reduce the carbon footprint of cities. We engaged in a study about 18 months ago in which we did just that. Planners and engineers and developers, the general public, think of cities as just being about the buildings and the streets. They are that, but more than that, they are about the human interaction with the built environment. We need to understand more about that because it's actually human activity that produces greenhouse gas. So we need to understand how human beings interact with the built environment if we're going to hope to reduce the carbon footprint of cities. So here's our challenge. Climate change must be dealt with at multiple levels. I think the most important one, certainly the one we're looking at today, is the municipal level, the city, the urban level. In cities, human activity is, as measured by transportation and buildings and their activity within those frameworks, is largely responsible for the carbon emissions that drive climate change. Factoring human behavior into urban design and planning can add to the impressive technological advances that we've already seen in buildings and transit. We need to be able to mitigate future climate change and offer adaptive solutions. Most of U.S. housing is still built on the premise of the single-family detached house in the suburbs that sprawls out and eats up valuable land for farms and for open space. We need to find out how to help people meet their basic needs in a compact and urban environment that can help them to reduce the carbon footprint. So Arup partnered with us so that we could look at how people meet their needs in the built environment. We concentrated on human-centered activity and how it affects the environment, rather than looking at the framework of buildings and open space and transportation and streets and how human beings might fit into that. So we emphasized the human being when we did this research. We reviewed over 130 sources from urban planning, economy, sociology, and psychology journals, and we interviewed 10 experts who would help us guide this study and help us reach better conclusions. How do people interact with the built environment? Well, we have some examples from the studies that we're going to go through very quickly that have to do with all of the items that you see there. Let's take the first theme, transportation. We found that the United States Convention is to plan for car travel. That is to say, they assume that people are going to be traveling by car. And other forms of transportation are alternatives to car transportation, including biking and walking. We think this is actually backwards. Walking is primary. It's what people all over the globe do to meet their basic needs. However, the more affluent a society becomes, it's more likely to become mechanized. In the United States, in particular, Americans have what could be called a love affair with the private automobile. But there are different, important differences within groups as to how transit, transportation, automobile use, etc., are all used. What are some of the factors in Americans' use of transit? We found that recent immigrants tend to walk more. Immigrant status has a significant impact on travel behavior, even after accounting for other socio-demographic factors. There are differences for women. Women tend to walk less, bike less, use the bus more, use the underground less, make more trips, make shorter trips, and have a shorter commute range. There are lots of reasons for that that are detailed within the report. You can see that there are different densities for Los Angeles, Paris, and Hong Kong. But the perception of density varies with culture. It's not a uniform. You can't talk about what people want as a general class. You can't say people like density, people don't like density. Different kinds of people from different cultures gravitate toward different densities. Asian and South European immigrants react more positively to density than US-born Americans do. Immigrant groups populate in cities of higher density. There are language and cultural concerns that make that so. But as they become affluent in the past, they have moved to suburban communities. This may be about to change. Because we found that even among families with children, among native-born populations, they were willing to trade lot size in that single-family detached home for ideal homes for walkable, diverse communities. Looking at the theme of open space, we found that there are 8 ethnic and racial differences in the preferences for park uses. Whites who are non-Hispanics are most likely to favor rural, wildland, and water-based activities. They like to be alone. They like to be able to exercise. African Americans favor organized recreation in groups. Not so much conservation uses and not so much nature-based activities. Hispanics tend to favor social aspects of outdoor activities and amenities for family groups. The family is very important in Hispanic culture. Asian Americans are more likely to prefer scenic beauty over recreational functionality. Minority groups in general are more likely to feel unsafe in large parks and outdoor public spaces, such as recreation areas, local parks, and nature centers. This we found from looking at many different kinds of articles on these topics. Immigrants are more likely to want to be with their family. And even after that, the second and subsequent generations tend to want to be with their friends. So it's a little bit of a difference between recent immigrants and the children of those immigrants. So we just wanted to kind of put a stake in the ground about social research and how to engage people within the idea of creating urban areas. We really have to listen to what many different kinds of people want within a very diverse urban environment, so we're able to help them meet their basic needs. So the proposed solutions to the climate change problem have mostly been seen in technical terms, in terms of energy efficiency, new design, and so on. We see it as a human-centered problem because it's human activity, not the technology itself, that actually generates the problem and can solve the problem. Here are some of the things we found when we think about sustainable cities. In terms of livability, we need design that accommodates differences, the kinds of differences that we have looked at earlier, whether it's gender, age, disability, culture, and those other aspects. We need to make sustainable mobility modes the default over private car use. In other words, emphasize the more primary transportation mechanisms that human beings have been using for millennia. We need to ensure a range of green space and open space because that's just helpful for our psyche as human beings. So that's livability, but adaptability is really something that we're going to need to do more of in the face of climate change and the need for resilient building. Here are some of the suggestions that we came up with based upon the research that we did. And finally, one of the things that people rarely think about is maintenance and durability. If you have embedded energy within current design, within current buildings, literally in concrete, you need to make the most of that. Instead of building a whole new building for new usage, you need to build buildings that are flexible in their uses so that they can be used over and over again and retain the embedded carbon within them. Maintenance and upkeep needs to be constant and continuous. This is something that's not thought of enough when we think about planning, when we think about climate change. But using the embedded carbon that you have is going to help all of us. Livability. Here's what we know about livability. So we reviewed these literature sources. We found that current U.S. design premises do not adequately meet the needs of current diverse populations and inevitably changing populations. Populations are going to change by demographics, they're going to change by race, they're going to change by age. And we need to be able to help people meet their basic needs regardless of those demographics. Because if we're going to be living in more compact urban communities, that is going to be a diverse community. Group culture, gender, age, and other sociodemographic characteristics are more predictive of behavior than individual preferences. In the United States, we put a lot of stock in our market-based economy, in which we look at individual preferences for buying particular things. But it turns out that our culture, our age, and other sociodemographic factors are going to be much more determinative of what we do than individual preferences will be. Again, pedestrian and bicycle use has to be the first choice, and green space needs to be something that fulfills many basic needs. More green space needs to happen within cities. These are some of the recommendations that we came across for achieving low carbon development. Human interaction with the built environment is what is going to determine our ability to reduce greenhouse gases. But what I've been able to do today is just a very brief synopsis of the kinds of information that you will find in the report. So I put on the screen here the URL for the Institute for Environmental Entrepreneurship, which is enviroinstitute.org, as well as for Arup, which is arup.com. Thank you.